First off, I want to thank the grace of heaven and the virtues of the masters, the mercy of the grand predecessors, and the transmitting masters and everyone here to talk about the middle way. The middle way. Okay, so this is really, well, Buddha talks about the middle way too, and actually a lot of the saints and sages, they talk about the middle way, how to become, well, to transcend this life, if you will, but that's the ultimate thing. But we have to follow the middle way. The middle way is something that if we don't follow, it is basically, that is our, you could say, the inner truth, okay, that we want to follow. All right. Let's see. Okay, so so as Buddha says, right, whatever we think, that's what we become. It basically starts from our thoughts, our mind. This is maybe in other in religions, other religions, they don't really say it this way. They don't say this, but basically, everything is in our mind. Our reality is in our mind, and so. But of course, here Buddha is also talking about not just now, right? The now, but from the past, right? So that there's this whole concept of karma, causality and karma, and so everything that we think. So basically, we have to be careful of what's in our mind. Okay. No, it's not just thinking, but it could be feelings, these types of things, emotions. They can affect our being. Okay, and so you probably you hear the be careful of our thoughts, for they become words, and then be careful of words, but they become actions, or choose our words carefully, and they become actions. Observe our actions, for they become our habits, right? And then study our habits, for they become our character, and then finally our character. That's what we say, like you could say personality, right? That's kind of who we think we are. Okay, and so that then determines our destiny. So ultimately, thoughts. We think it's no big deal, right? I have some thoughts. But they can lead to creating karma, which then determines who or what we are today. Okay, so this goes back, not just this life, not just earlier, just before this present moment in this life, but also previous lives, because usually karma is not doesn't happen in the same lifetime. So, are the result of karma. So sometimes it's hard to say, how we ended up. Well, where we are today, or how what we are today. There's a saying, right? I think there's a saying. Like we sometimes we say we are our own worst enemy. Other people, they can defeat us. That's other people can be, they're better than us. They can be better than us, and things like that. But ultimately, we are our own worst enemy, because of our ego, you can say, right? And ultimately, we can determine, what we are. We can decide to be whatever we want to be. It's just that we don't, most people, they don't have that mental discipline. That's the problem, okay? So ultimately, we need to understand ourselves, okay? We have to examine ourselves, observe ourselves, our thoughts, our words and our actions. Okay. So we want to look at what it is that we are as sentient beings. Basically, we are kind of composed of a lot of like emotions, for example, and desires. Okay, through our six senses. And then, like I said, we have habits, we have our temperament, we have preferences, and then of course we have this physical body as well. And then this all adds up, and when you put everything together, the whole package, it's what we call I. Okay, this is me, and there's also the ego component, which is, you can say, the mental component of this. And then you say, we have a personality. Okay, so this obviously this doesn't list everything. It also includes our views of things, our perspectives, right? Also things like pride, arrogance, doubts, ignorance. These are all, of course, pretty much everything it's all in our mind. Okay, all these things are all coming from the mind. So we have to understand who this I is, this ego personality. In Buddhism, the Buddha, they talk about anatta. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it's basically the non-self, the no self. Okay, so it's basically, but we are all, I don't know, we're brought up, we experience everything in this world as having this I, this self. But Buddha is saying that these are just illusions, really. There is no such thing as this I. It doesn't really exist. In fact, Buddha, there are these unanswered questions that Buddha does not answer. Like, I think there was a question about whether the soul, exists, always exists as a permanent thing. And Buddha doesn't refuses to talk about that. Actually, probably because the truth of the matter is, people would, if Buddha spoke the truth about that, about the soul, because we think, most of us, or even religions, they typically talk about, we have the soul, and then the soul. So if they talk about reincarnation, the soul is the one that gets reincarnated, but it's not permanent, and and probably the truth will be very shocking to everyone about the soul. I mean, because just like our personality, we have a personality in this life, but this personality changes, right? It's not just in this life, but changes from life to life, lifetime to lifetime. It's completely different. Okay, you have completely different personality, and so that I is completely different, actually. What is it that's, we say that there's still this soul that's the same, but that gets tricky. Okay, so that's why Buddha doesn't talk about that. But so anyways, so we have to understand, look within ourselves to try to understand what we are as as a sentient being. This is, we're made up of all these things. We have all these things. Most of these are mental objects. Of course, the body, we're very attached to this physical body as well. But ultimately, we have to kind of let go of these attachments, because the more attached we are to these things, then basically that just leads to more continuous reincarnation. Basically, we cannot transcend, we cannot become fully enlightened, right, if we are attached to all these things. It's not to say that we get rid of all our emotions, things like that, or our senses, but so that's why it's called the middle way, right? Because the Buddha, in his search for the truth, about what life is, basically he experienced both extremes, to both ends. Basically, he experienced the life of luxury, and he also experienced, when he left the palace, the life of basically you could say renunciation, so giving up everything, okay, and also going more extreme, to actually suffering, physically. But those are two extremes, and so you realize that, well, that's neither of which will attain enlightenment. So it's that's why it's kind of called the middle way. Right. Okay, so now we can't get away from talking about this Four Noble Truths. Okay, so the Buddha, his realization that these are the truth about life, really, that the truth that basically in life, as long as there is existence, right, or what we call a being, okay, whether it's like a being like, humans or animals or even spiritual beings, okay, there is suffering. Suffering, well, dukkha, it's basically suffering, meaning, sometimes we don't think that we're suffering, but it also means that it's unsatisfactory. It's not perfect. Okay, so life is not perfect, right? And then also that the truth of the origin of suffering, that there is a cause of the suffering, which he later talks about it's coming from within us. Okay, it's not external. Okay, and then that there's a truth of the cessation of suffering, that we can end the suffering. All right, there's a way to end it, and then that's the last one where there is the way, which is that middle way, the middle path to end the way of suffering. Okay, so if we kind of follow, it's kind of like giving kind of a recipe for us to kind of get out of this suffering. The suffering, of course, also not just in this life, but if you look at the bigger view of reincarnation, suffering from life, going from life to life, okay, reincarnating, that's also a suffering, right? So given that these are the truths, right? These are truths, then we have to understand why, why it's true, basically. So we look at why we suffer, right? Basically, you said, Buddha says it's through our desires and attachments, right? But ultimately, we say ignorance. Ignorance is kind of broad, general term, but that kind of covers everything. But yeah, it's having desires. Desires are also a type of attachment, you could say. And the stronger our attachments, the stronger our desires, right? Those lead to, they become, we become like having a fixed, set view of things, and then that, not being very flexible, and so we end up, maybe doing things, saying things, whatever, that we end up creating karma anyways. Okay, so from these differentiation is also very important, because basically that is what we view ourselves as being. We're all individuals, right? We view ourselves as being different from each other. Obviously, physically we are individuals, and then also, of course, the mental aspect is the same thing. And because of that differentiation, then that leads to all these other things too. Okay, so and we'll talk more about the differentiation. But basically, these are it's illusory. Okay, it's an illusion. But okay, and then emotions, of course. We have emotions as a human. We have a bunch of emotions, like you saw earlier. And it's not that we should give up on emotions, just that sometimes, if we don't moderate ourselves, like sometimes the emotions can, if we are being controlled by our emotions, let's put it that way, that's a problem. Okay, so we have to keep our emotions in check. That emotions are, yes, we can express emotions, but it should be appropriate. Okay. And then, of course, the ego, that the idea of this self, it's a delusional self. Okay, it's not real. It's not real. It's hard. I mean, it's kind of hard to maybe see that right away or accept that sometimes. But because that's all, it seems like that's all we know, and so obviously in the practice, for like Buddha and all those monks, they practice the cultivation is to kind of realize that, and then gradually, and part of their practices, is to gradually get rid of that, because everything, you can say everything is coming from that ego, right? Right. But yeah, so ignorance, of course. So ignorance, we can address ignorance through trying to learn, but that's one aspect of it. It's just learning some knowledge to help us, guide us. But it kind of reminds me of the when Jesus was crucified, right? He was on the cross, and he asked God to forgive those who crucified him, because he says, they don't know what they're doing. Basically, they're ignorant. Okay, so this ignorance causes sentient beings to do things that they shouldn't do, and whether they realize it or not, or whether they know that it's they should do it or not, that's it's this ignorance, and the ignorance could be the way that the society is, maybe that's the way the law is, or whatever, but it's set by humans, okay, set by people, how we determine that. And then, but from the enlightened view, from the view of Buddha, say, these things could all be due to ignorance, okay. So what we may not think of it as, we think it's the right thing normally, but then maybe that's from the Buddha's point of view, it's actually ignorant view. Okay. Okay. So differentiation. Whoops. Oh, sorry. Let's go through this. Okay. So differentiation. We have self-interest. Actually, okay. Yeah. Okay. So self-interest, again, coming from that self. So yeah, you could say it's being selfish, but self-interest. This goes through, everyone has certain amounts of self-interest, and that also applies to like countries, right? But the problem, where this comes from, comes from our ego again, self-interest, saying, I do this, because it's, good for me, right? That's self-interest. Or I don't want to do this because it's bad for me. So that's also self-interest. Okay, so and again, this is attachment to our ideas about likes and dislikes. Those are preferences. Okay, so those are listed later on here. But self-interest can also, of course, lead to conflicts, right, with other people. They also have their own self-interest, and so there's this end up with you can have conflicts of self-interest, conflicts of interest. So we see that also in society, in the world, right? With countries, this country here, they want to protect their interests, and then another country also wants to protect their own interests. So, and there could be conflict there. Okay, so subject-object duality, yeah. So this is definitely, again, you could say it arises from having that ego too, or that sense of self. So basically, I am me and you are you, right? Like I said, we seem to be, everyone is different. Everyone is their own individual person, that we are separate. And so, it's not just persons, but, to everything. So I am a person, and I am not like a chair. I'm not an object. Okay. You can say that. But subject-object duality, and that this thing comes into play in the other things too, where basically this causes us problems. So this is kind of a view that we have as humans, I, I don't know if you can say we're born with this type of way of this view or thinking. But certainly as we learn and, we grow up, experience things, it gets even stronger and stronger. So this is very difficult to kind of get rid of. But, it's like you have this us and them attitude now, in society, which is, this is the cause of a lot of suffering and conflict, right? It's like they're the protesters demonstrating. Okay, they're demonstrating some, they're saying, there's some systemic, bias or systemic racism, right? And maybe among police departments or whatever. But they're protesting and they're demonstrating, and then they're facing off against the police. Now, it's again, it's due to a few bad people, a few bad cops, maybe. Yeah, this happens, and then so it's kind of, I don't know. It doesn't make too much sense to me that you're trying to you're protesting against the police in general. So I mean, this is kind of when there's a generalization, there's always going to be a problem. Okay, so but anyways, yeah, there's us and them attitude, and it's also among countries too. You have the same us and them attitude that kind of divides nations, divides people. Okay, and then also talking about who's right and wrong, who's right, who's wrong. This is also something that was very ingrained, that we always try to review things in these terms. And, of course, even though maybe right and wrong, I mean, usually, unfortunately, we view it as it's very black and white. Okay, it's either right. If it's not right, then it's wrong. If it's not wrong, it's right. Okay, so, but it, that's... Technically, you might say that that's true for many cases, but that's taken a different view of you can say a very narrow view of things, and so that's something that we have to be careful about when we say, oh, it's right and wrong. So then again, this is where you end up in conflict and you don't have harmony. Okay, and in the duality. Duality, these are all duality basically, but likes and dislikes, things like these opposite things, preferences, having preferences. Okay, so that's a little bit milder than the like and dislike, or love and hate, right? But still, this duality, this view of duality, is because of this, having this sense of differentiation of we're different, and so and then that also has bias and discrimination is also in there. So let's see. Right. Okay. All right. So why do we? So, so we kind of see. Okay, there are this aspect of our mind, if you will, that views things in this way. So this is kind of a common view that we have of things. And so why do we differentiate? Right. Something called the four images. Okay, I don't know, some people might call it the four appearances or four marks, something like that, but you can say four images. We have this image of the self or the ego, okay? So this I exist, I say that I exist and I'm real, okay? And so that's kind of like what, the French philosopher and mathematician René Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. Okay, so it's basically... you could say we have a consciousness and we could think, therefore we think that then I have to exist, then I am real, okay, so that's, and then, okay, from that, then there's also the idea of a person, that I am a person, I am a human being. So distinct from other human beings. So I am an individual human being that's different from other human beings and also different from other life forms. Okay. And so, so this, you can say that this is basically kind of like so sometimes it's called personality. So this is, everyone has different personality. So that's kind of what distinguishes us from each other, if you will. Right? If you imagine if society is full of, if everyone has the same personality, then it's like everyone would be the same. It's going to be kind of weird. But anyways, this is kind of this is another factor in our view of things that leads to having problems. Okay. And then sentient beings, next level is basically actually this, so all sentient beings that, we are sentient beings, that we are actually defined by the 5 skandhas. Okay, so we'll talk about that next, but that's the way we view the world. Okay, the way we experience the world, the way we view ourselves even. Okay, usually it's through, we can't escape really from these 5 skandhas, right? And then also, the view that we have this lifespan, because I exist, I am this person, this human being, and that my life, that my being in this world right now, my life, there's a limit to this lifespan. Okay, so basically saying this person exists while when I was born, and then when I die, that ends it. Okay. So we are kind of very attached to this life, this present life, because we think, well, when we die, that's it. There's nothing, and I certainly can't take anything with me. But so we become very attached to this life, and we don't want to we don't want to let it go. No one wants to die, right? Okay. All right, so what's the root of having these 4 images, or the basis of having these 4 images is what we call the 5 skandhas. Okay, so the 5 skandhas are form, and this is the you can say the material or the physical level of form, which includes our body and also external forms, right? So this, obviously we have this, okay, and then sensation is the next level. So sensation, because we have senses, right? We have 6 senses really. Basically, we have the sense of sight, right? Sense of hearing, sense of taste, sense of smell, sense of touch, and then also the sense of our consciousness, our mind. All right. So sensation is the contact between objects, so form, basically the external forms, and senses, and these senses. Okay, so but in terms of in the case of the mind, or the mind part sense, that would be sense basically mental objects. Okay, these aren't physical objects. All right, so but the contact between these objects and senses. Okay, so unless you isolate yourself, like put yourself into one of those what do they call it, the sensory deprivation tanks or something, where you don't sense anything, but actually you can still sense. Your mind is still sensing. Okay, so even though you might cut off your physical senses, the mind is still active, right, and can sense things. So part of the practice, if you will, the Buddha, is there's like meditation, there's mind, the mind discipline. Okay, so that is also part of the practice. But okay, so this is at the very lowest level, the sensation. So we see that there is light, right? When we open our eyes through our vision, we notice there's light. We can see various, colors, shapes, things like that. Or we can sense, we can touch, we can feel something as hot. We can feel something as cold. Okay, so this is kind of at the very lowest level of sensing. The next level is perception. I think some yeah, okay. Others, they might say, conception or ideas, basically. So this is where we have then, based on those senses, that sensory input that we're getting, that we have an idea of what it is. Okay, so this is where we start differentiating. Say, oh, okay, so this is hot as opposed to cold. This is something, and also having judgment beyond that, saying, I don't like the feel of this hot, something that's hot. Okay, and so. And we might have an idea, preconception based on our experiences or what we have learned, what we have heard about. Oh, when I sense this, it must mean this, something else, or it must mean certain thing. Okay, so we might have some preconceptions in there, which basically lead to our biases. Okay, so we might have some biases. So that's that. Then we have a judgment about this sense that we're experiencing. Now, if you think about like a baby, the baby is also, of course, made up of these 5 skandhas. Okay, they experience through these 5 skandhas as well. But so everyone, basically through the senses, sensation is the same. Perception, maybe they don't think as much. I mean, obviously they don't have the cognitive aspect as developed as adults, where we can apply a concept to something, but they don't, and so for them it's more it's pure feeling that sensation, but then realizing that wow, they touch something, it causes pain, it's hot, it causes pain, and they just react to that directly. Okay. Without really thinking about, what it is, what's causing this, why is it hot, or why is it painful, whereas we tend to start thinking about those things, right? You could say at the very if we have just a reaction, usually, for things like pain, we can have kind of like that low level reaction without really thinking about it or differentiating or having some idea. But right after, or pretty much immediately after that, we start having ideas, thinking about it. Okay, so that's a little bit different. And then the baby, they won't judge. So these are things that come, we develop later on. And then the next, so after that, after we go through this perception process, then there's volition. Volition then is basically like a will to act, an intention or motivation. So in terms of, like, let's say we touch something hot, that's usually a pretty you can say we say it's like a natural reaction or reflexive reaction to it, and you immediately pull our hand away or whatever. Okay, so this doesn't really go through this process of volition here, but other things, for example, let's say we smell something, we smell this odor, it smells really bad, or so that's in that perception area where we think this smells bad, I don't like this smell, right? There's this judgment, then that causes us to say, either I say, wow, ooh, that smells really bad, and you kind of you cover up your nose, and then you try to like move away, and so that's what this volition is. So besides the very low level type of reactions, the reflexive or instinctive reactions, then it goes up to this level where we have volition, where we have a will to want to do something, okay, as a result of our perception and sensation. And then finally, at the highest level is consciousness. Consciousness, you can say it's this this all of this has kind of gone into our consciousness, because some of it can be kind of like we say unconscious. Okay, so when we're dealing with things, it's somewhat unconscious, but unconscious, like the volition, some of the behavior, the reflexive action. But once it gets into our consciousness, then it's kind of there. It's in our memory, and we remember, and it kind of builds up. So we have, from our experiences, of course, everything, it's based on our experiences in life, and that kind of builds up, accumulates within our consciousness, in our memories. And that so based on, but then it's already at this point, because it's gone through the perception part where we might have biases and things like that. So it's already, it may not be the proper view of things. Okay, so we have we might have a biased view of something. Okay, so this is kind of like the 5 skandhas is. We as sentient beings, this is how we experience the world, okay? And this is how we experience, even things within our mind itself, okay? And this gives us the illusion of self, okay? So that's what Buddha is saying, is that this idea of self comes from the 5 skandhas, and it's not real. It's not real. I mean, we think it's real, okay, because we have this body. Yeah, this body feels real, and all that. Everything feels real, seems real. But this is really an illusion, ultimately, because everything. Remember, in the beginning, when I said that everything comes from, or what we are is because of what we think or what we have thought. Okay, so. Everything comes from the mind, really. What we are today, I mean, we think we're real, but it's the result of causes and conditions, right? The karma. And so everything is conditional. So our existence, our being here today is conditional, all right? So it's not absolute, right? So okay, but anyways, this is... So we have to basically, get ourselves away or extricate ourselves from the illusion of this self, right? So we cannot become attached. So that's why in the practice, you could say, there are things like precepts, rules, regulations, things like that. The moral and ethical codes, right, that we should follow. They help us to avoid some sensation, right, for by not coming into contact with things. So that's we can't completely, like I said earlier, we can't really completely cut off our senses, right? And that's not really the solution either. But we can avoid certain things. Okay, so avoiding, so for example, you should not see. Just like in Confucius, right? The 4, the 4 do nots or something. The see no, basically see no evil, right? Speak no evil, do no evil, hear no evil, right? Or I guess it's 3. And so those, if we can, so that's what the precepts are kind of led us to tell us. We shouldn't come into contact with those things. Because the more we come into contact, they will start to influence, they'll start to affect us, okay, through our perceptions and then volition and consciousness. So that's why it's always best to avoid those things as much as possible. We think, this doesn't bother me. I can, go watch all these violent movies or play these violent video games. It's not going to affect me, but it does. Maybe not. Very not very obviously, but it could affect us, at a very subtle level or internally, and one day, that can cause us to become violent, maybe. Okay, so it's best to avoid these things as much as possible. But of course, we can't avoid everything, and so really, the place where we can actually make a change or do something is perception. So I think that's 2 weeks ago I was talking about that. Perception is everything, right? So we can flip that mental switch. If we can flip that mental switch and perceive things in the right way, in the proper right way, then we won't have problems. Okay, so that is where perception is where we can actually address this, this issue, right? Okay. All right. So what is the middle way, right? Yeah, it's kind of walking a fine path, fine line between, left and right, right and wrong. But it's not a straight path, right? It's not like, oh, it's just right in the middle. Okay, so right in the middle isn't always right. Okay, so isn't always proper, you can say. Okay, so so middle doesn't really mean right in the middle. Of course, it does mean usually, that's not extreme. You don't go to the extremes. Okay. And also, so because of that, then you could say also that it implies moderation, right? So like, for example, moderation in whatever we do, what we say, even our emotions, when we react to things, we have moderation. We don't go to extreme. And you could say also balanced, that everything is, there is a balance to things. So it's it's not always one or the other. Okay, so all right. So what we want to do is get to this non-differentiation, right? So where we can get to this this view of no subject-object duality. So Buddhists say, well, hey, we are all sentient beings are Buddhas, right? So from their view, there is no subject-object duality because everyone's a Buddha, so everyone's the same. You can say it is equal, so that's that's the highest level. It's equanimity. Okay, so it's everyone is the same, is equal. Okay, and in fact, there is no right, and not just equal or the same. Well, you can say the same is in the sense that there's also that there is only one. There's no distinction between you and me. Okay. And then also comparisons, like we like to compare. As humans, we're always comparing, contrast. And so that we have to try to get away from comparing. I mean, it's, sometimes we could use that, like, let's say if we want to compare, we should compare, let's say, we can compare ourselves to like a Buddha or a saint or sage. And we can say, well, wow, I aspire to become, like them. And, so that type of comparison can be used as a motivation, if you will, motivational force to help us, to inspire us, to guide us, to become better, right? We don't want to compare ourselves, in a way like, or we don't want to compare to other people, say, they have, that person, they have like the fancy cars, the fancy big house, they have all these things, and I don't. And then so that can lead to, then we have desires. We say, oh, I want to be like them, and I start pursuing these things. So yes, comparison has to be the right comparisons. But ideally, there's really no need for comparisons. Prejudice, bias, discrimination. Of course, these are things that we should not have. Basically, these are our own personal views that they suit us, okay, individually, that we think, oh, this is the right way, this is the right view, etc. And of course, everyone will have their own prejudices or biases or discriminations. It's just a matter of degree. Some people, they may have less, but for the most part, everyone does have at least biases and preferences. Okay, so. But, if you say prejudice and discrimination, maybe that's a little bit more extreme, a stronger degree. But, again, how it becomes that is because we start off with a little bias and then it builds up. Okay, so after, through our experience and everything, that it starts building up and getting stronger and stronger, it becomes discrimination and prejudice. Okay, so we have to be mindful of that. We have to watch that. No attachments. Of course, we don't want to attach to anything. Especially, we don't want to become attached to illusions. So So things that we think are real, but they're not, and we become attached to them, that's very foolish. So that's why it's very important to understand, to try to understand what is true, what is not, so that we can follow the truth, and not, if we keep following the illusions, we become, we're attached to these illusions, then we will never get out of this illusory, this existence. Okay, so that is something that we have to break out of. So basically, we want to be centered and in harmony. Centered, right? So as opposed to, so it's kind of like that middle path that you saw earlier. But it's centered. So centered doesn't mean that it's, again, it's not absolute. Okay, it's not like right in the middle, right? So again, it's kind of, it depends. Okay, so you can say it depends on the situation, right? So centered and harmony. So these are two things. That's centered within ourselves, and then when we follow that centeredness, it becomes a harmony on the outside. Okay, so basically we have to be aware or mindful of the actions of our body, speech, and mind. Okay, so this part of the practice will be this mindfulness practice, and then also basically when we say the middle way, or what's right, it's just right. Okay, things that it's just appropriate response. So we do things. So there is no one right answer. So when we say just right, it doesn't mean right or wrong. It just means that it's whatever is appropriate for at any given moment. That is you can say that is the right answer. Okay, but it's also you can say that there may not be just a single right or a single appropriate response. I mean, there could be more different appropriate responses in a given moment. Okay, so it could be like varying degrees. For example, let's say we meet someone, we greet them, and we want to show respect, so we take a bow, right? Well, you can take a bow. You can bow 30 degrees. You can bow 45 degrees. You can bow 60 degrees. You can bow 90 degrees, or you can bow even more than 90 degrees. These are different varying degrees, okay, of that response. But but it could be that for who, depending on who you're bowing to, maybe 90-degree response bowing 90 degrees is probably the more appropriate, as opposed to bowing just 45 degrees, but in general, you can say that there's no one right answer. Okay, it's just a matter of degree. Okay, of what we would do. All right. So let's talk about this centered and in harmony. So Lao Tzu, right? So what I would say is that centered. So again, we talk about Wu Wei a lot, because this is like the main, you can say the philosophy, the principle in Lao Tzu's philosophy, right? And I just say that because I've said this in the past, right? The Wu Wei aspect is, you can say it's internal, and so that's the centered aspect, being centered. It's really having non-intent. Non-intent. Basically meaning no ego, no self-interest, okay, in this intent. It doesn't come from the ego. It doesn't come from any of our biases. And so that just comes directly from what we would call this Buddha nature, okay? And then on the outside, when we express this centeredness, then that's what we call harmony. And, so I say that's this suiyan, this effortless action and flow that comes from this Wu Wei, okay, from the centeredness. All right, so this is kind of how I would, say this. And all right, and then so Confucius, says basically the same thing, right? Centered is that sincere true self, right? I don't have the diagram in here, but remember the 5 constant virtues, right? This in the center is that sincerity or that faith, So that is really expressing that true self. That is the true self. So the being centered is being with that true self, being with your conscience. Okay, you can say the conscience is in that center. And then so when Confucius says, when we express our, let's say, emotions, it's the appropriate expression of our emotions is harmony. Okay, so so therefore we don't go to extremes with our emotions in this case. Basically, so when it's time to grieve, yes, we lose a loved one, we lose someone, and we definitely feel sorrow, we feel grief, but we shouldn't go to extreme, right? We shouldn't, we shouldn't go overboard. When we go overboard, then that really affects our ability to function properly, okay, as a human being, all right? And so therefore, we need to moderate our emotions. So that's what Confucius is saying, that to be in harmony, our emotions have to be appropriate, and it has to be appropriate to the situation. Okay, so we can't go overboard. We also saying, you can also say that it doesn't mean that we have no emotion at all. So when we lose a loved one, and it seems like we're not sad, then that's not in harmony either. Okay, so that and also you can say that the expression of those other four constant virtues, right, the benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, how those are expressed or how those are manifested also is what we call this harmony. So it'd be things are in harmony. Okay. Right. So then what Buddha talks about is basically you can say that the Noble Eightfold Path is the middle way. Okay, his way, basically this is the way to, right, in the Four Noble Truths, the fourth Noble Truth says the way to end the suffering, the dukkha, is, and he prescribed this, you can say he prescribed this Noble Eightfold Path, okay, as the way to do that. So having the proper view and understanding. So this is very important. So this is basically one of the wisdom aspects, okay? Basically, the Noble Eightfold Path is kind of divided up into three aspects. One is wisdom, the other one is ethical conduct, and then the other one is concentration of the mind. Okay, so this is the wisdom. Basically, having the proper view and understanding, realize that there are karmic consequences to, all the actions of our body, of our speech, and of our mind. All right, so that's why, that's why basically that quote in the very beginning, that we are, what we think, it's this. Okay, so we have to understand that. We have to understand karma. We have to understand that everything that we do, everything that we say, that everything that we think they are planting karmic seeds, which could result in are being a certain way or having a certain quality in later in life or in a future life. Okay, the three marks of existence, right? So this is something that we have to have an understanding of. That basically it's saying that everything, basically everything is anicca. Anicca means impermanent. Okay, so everything is impermanent, and everything is also dukkha, which is suffering, or you can say unsatisfactory or imperfect. Okay, and then everything is also anatta. Anatta is a very key concept in Buddhism. It's basically no self. Okay, so it's non-self, no self. You can say ultimately that it's basically emptiness. Okay, sometimes we talk about emptiness. You can say it's referring to that too. But basically, so it says all existence falls into these three qualities. Okay, that everything is impermanent, right? Because everything's constantly changing. There's a beginning, things are created, and then there's an end to it. And in the meantime, there is the imperfection of it. The whether it's suffering, in terms of beings, living beings, they go through suffering. Um, and then finally, that it's really, there is no true essence to this existence. Okay, and so this is another very key concept, something that is very important in the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. And then, of course, the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so we talked about this earlier. Okay. So, okay. All right. So the next one is proper intention or will, proper will. Okay, so basically we want to resolve, we have to have that will or determination, the resolve to become unattached to the mundane, to detach, to not become attached to basically the everything. Okay, because it's everything is an illusion. Okay, it's again, remember, everything falls under the three marks of existence, right? So we should not become attached to these things, even our body. Okay, right? We know that yes, we have a limited lifetime, and this body won't exist forever, and so we should not become too attached to it. Of course, while we are alive, we should make use of it appropriately. All right, but don't become attached. At the end, people are afraid. They don't want to leave this life, leave this world. But at the end, we have to let go. Right? If we can't let go, then that's only going to bring us back. Okay. So we have to resolve to be kind, merciful, and benevolent. That basically, so this is basically trying to be selfless and altruistic. Okay, so harmless to any being, right? There's the concept, idea of ahimsa. That's the principle of ahimsa. Okay, so we don't harm any living being, any being at all. So that means obviously no killing. So that's one of the precepts, and not just not killing, but we don't want to harm them in ways, in any way too. So that could be like among humans. Obviously, we don't kill people, but then we might do things that hurt others, or we say things that hurt others. So that's also falls under this. And then not having any ill will. So not just what comes from our words and actions, but also in our mind, that we say in our mind, I'm cursing someone. We shouldn't do that. Okay, so we have to basically try to be kind, merciful, benevolent, and then resolve also to consider everything as basically the three marks of existence, the anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So this is the second one. So this one is kind of like, the first one is kind of just the understanding, you can say the knowledge part of it. And then this second one here, this proper intention will, is actually acting on that and really working on achieving, the I guess the intent of that knowledge. Okay. All right. So yeah. All right. And then the next third. Okay. So these are the third and the fourth, basically proper. Oh, okay. Let me see. Right. So that second one is also part of the wisdom aspect, and then these proper speech, proper action, and our conduct, and also there's also the next one, the livelihood. These are all part of ethical conduct. Okay. So proper speech. Basically, we abstain. We don't lie or speak falsehoods, abusive or harsh language, harsh words. We don't slander, or have say things that are divisive, that cause groups or individuals to turn against each other, or things like that. Double talk. Okay, no flattery, no gossip, things like that. Okay, so we avoid these things, and right, and then so basically, when we avoid these things, what's left is basically the good stuff. Okay, so we say good words. I mean, if we can't, say something in a good way, then we should not say it. Right? It's the noble silence. Right? So, and then proper action and conduct, abstain from. Okay, so these are the basic three precepts, if you will: the no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct or improprieties. Okay, so that then so if we don't do these things, then of course the other things we can do what's considered considered to be good. Okay, that's beneficial to others, right? That's really what we should always keep in mind is always try to be whether we say things or what we do things to be of benefit to others. Try to be of benefit to others, because then we are basically there's always karma, and the question is what type of karma. So this would be planting the seeds of good karma, if you will. Okay, all right, and then so proper livelihood or occupation. Basically, don't what Buddha is saying is that don't be involved in like making weapons or instruments of killing. And then second one, so basically, ideally you don't work in like the defense industry, and then don't be involved in the raising or slaughtering of animals. So this is because there's direct karma here, okay, and even the weapons and instruments of killing, let's say you design or you help build the missiles and bombs and bullets, guns, things like that. Well, you didn't directly do anything but kill anyone, but they're used to kill. Okay, so then there's still karma there. And then unfortunately, is raising and slaughtering of animals. This actually, you can kind of extend this. This is kind of more extreme. Maybe most of us don't do it, but actually, like in Iowa, there are a lot of they used to be refugees, like from these certain countries. They live there, but then this is kind of like the work that they do, unfortunately. And there are a lot of them that are also they receive the Tao Kin, but what can you do? They have to make a living, and this is basically kind of the only type of job that they can do. But we try to encourage people to get away from this, because this is also bad karma. Also, actually, the Siddhigarbha Buddha, there's a scripture that he says that not just, this is more direct, but more indirectly, if we are supporting, let's say, or we work in a restaurant that sells meat, that kind of stuff, or even like a supermarket, that there's some karma there too. So that's a little bit more extreme, if you will. Kind of in terms of but of course the karma would be less than the direct killing. Okay, and then don't be involved in slavery of humans and probably even sentient beings. So we shouldn't be involved in that. And don't be involved in intoxicants and narcotics. Okay, so alcohol, drugs that, not used for medicine, or you misuse them, abuse them, right? These drugs, whether it's you're in the manufacture of these things or you're distributing them, shouldn't be involved in these things. All right, because they affect people in a bad way. Okay, and then do not be involved in poisons. Poisons also, probably no one's involved in this type of thing, but basically it could be things like developing these, chemicals, things like that. So like you find out there's this the weed killer, right? Roundup. It uses a chemical in there that apparently has been found to potentially cause cancer. And so a lot of people are suing, Monsanto, the company, but that makes this. But so we don't want to be involved in this type of thing, because, all right. And then so that's also part of the ethical conduct. Okay, that practice. And then the next one, proper effort. So this is part of the mental discipline aspect, or the concentration, right? Mental concentration and discipline. So proper effort is eliminate unwholesome qualities or states within us. So basically, the things that we want to get rid of, like bad habits, we have vices, smoking, drinking, whatever whatever bad vices we have. Yeah, we want to try to eliminate these, prevent the unwholesome qualities from arising. So then we don't want to get into these if we don't already, if we don't have them already, right? And then the other aspect is to maintain wholesome qualities, anything that the good that we have, right? Keep those, and then we want to promote more of that good. That good qualities that we don't have already. Let's say, so that's why it's always good. We see, we should be inspired by other people when we see something good in others that others have done, or something, or some good quality in someone else that we can learn from, and we should try to incorporate that within ourselves. Okay. So basically, the proper effort is basically to try to restrain the sense faculties, right? You can basically say, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, do no evil. Okay, so it's right, and then so it takes effort. I mean, we have to put in the effort to do this. Okay, it's just not going to come automatically, right? Let's see. Oh, okay. All right. So the next one is proper mindfulness. Again, this is one of the mental disciplines. So awareness of deeds, words, and actions, or thoughts. That everything okay. So basically, in the four aspects, the mind, our feelings, our emotions, our body, and also all things, phenomena, dharmas. Okay, dharmas in this case refers to not teachings, but it refers, because dharma, the word dharma is used two ways. One is that it's the teachings of the truth, you can say, but it also refers to all phenomena. Okay, so in this case, it's talking about all phenomena. All right, so realize that our mind, our consciousness, is impermanent. That because we are constantly having thoughts popping up, and then they go away, they come up, and go away, and so our mind is not constant. Okay, we don't have this constant mind. And then our feelings, our emotions, they call it that these things can cause suffering. Okay, so feelings, again, the sensation, right, from the five skandhas, from sensation, perception, that these will ultimately cause us, if we don't have the right view, that they will cause us suffering. And all dharmas, all phenomena, is dependent without self-identity or self-nature, anatta. So this is basically, again, being mindful of the three marks of existence, anicca, dukkha, and anatta, in everything, right? And that, right? So things don't exist by themselves, right? The only thing that you can say exists by itself is what we call that Buddha nature, that true nature. Okay, that's the only thing that is independent of anything. But everything else that's not the Buddha nature is dependent. It's conditional. Its existence is conditional, right? It only exists conditionally, if the conditions, depending on the conditions. And also our body is impure. That the idea here is to basically not to have self-infatuation, right? And then this would also, if we view the body as being impure, it's like, I mean, maybe on the surface or on appearance, we see, we see the body is beautiful, but that will lead to like lust, desire, things like that. And so, but we have to, if we analyze and look at the body, we see, well, it's really only made up of the four elements, whatever. And that if we look inside, it's kind of disgusting, actually. the body is, if you look it up close up. So it's the idea is to cut off that kind of desires for the body, or the sensations from the body. All right, all right, and then and also to let go of the attachment to the body. Okay, like the saying goes, from dust to dust. That we started out being dust, basically from the elements, from that eventually it returns back to the elements. Okay, so right? And then finally, the last one is, let's see, that is the last one. Okay, so proper concentration. So we want to develop this calm, non-attached, concentrated mind, right? This is basically focus, having focus of this concentration of mind. Unfortunately, today it's very difficult, and we have so many distractions. Right? Everything is distracting us, so especially when we have a smartphone, right? And we have we're on all the social media, and it's like every time we get a message pops up, and we look at it right away. So these are all distractions. Okay, but anyways, we have to have a calm, unattached, non-attached, concentrated mind, the intense concentration of the mind to achieve a state of pure equanimity. Okay, so basically, when we reach the highest, this in Buddhism, they talk about meditation. Okay, so basically that's what you can say, that this is kind of talking about samadhi and the different levels of dhyana, which are the levels of, you could say, the levels of concentration of the mind. At the highest level, we reach a state of pure equanimity. Basically, there is no, we basically don't have even the sense of joy or anything like that, or pleasure, or pain, and it at that point, I mean, this is very difficult, of course, and this probably takes a long time to try to achieve. But basically, this is kind of like we apply, when we're applying the proper mindfulness, and in our concentration. So the mindfulness, of course, that's examining. We're kind of analyzing ourselves, and then this concentration is to focus the mind, to not have, basically you can say, not give rise to thoughts, right? So the practice that we say, don't give rise to a single thought, let go of all karmic affinities, right? So so you can say that's contained within these noble eightfold paths. And okay, so we don't want to have any kind of anything that can, the conditions around us, the situations around us, we don't want them to influence or perturb our mind, right? So and then so that is kind of the highest level that I'm trying to get to. But so that this is all mental discipline. So that is very important. All right. So to eliminate suffering, we have to detach from the self. Basically, this is, again, this is not the complete self. This has a lot of some of it, right? So this same thing that we see. So we get rid of these things. So basically, to eliminate the four images, which is the false view of ourselves, and we are just left with the true self or the Buddha nature. That is really the state of bliss or nirvana. Nirvana is really the state of no suffering, okay, no dukkha, right? So ultimately that's what we don't want to cling to the idea of I or ego or personality. Some people, they are afraid. They say, in the end, so if I achieve nirvana, then, or become a Buddha, then I have no personality, and they're afraid of that. They say, wow, because they're so attached to their personality that they're unwilling to give that up. And unfortunately, if we don't give it up, then we cannot become enlightened. We cannot achieve nirvana, become a Buddha. Right? So we're going to be stuck in this cycle of reincarnation. Ultimately, this idea of this personality we have to let it go too. Okay. So that's the first two noble paths. They basically lay the foundation for achieving nirvana by letting us understand and realize or internalize the three dharma. Actually, those three marks of existence is also known as the three dharma seals. Okay, so I didn't put that there, but all right. Okay, so let's see. Basically, okay, so this in the Bible, right? So it says the eye is the lamp of the body, right? If therefore your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is evil, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So basically, this is because of differentiation. That eye is the lamp of the body. That is talking about the Buddha nature. Okay. So we want to use the eye of divine wisdom that comes from that Buddha nature, not the eye of the ego. Okay. So basically, when we use the eye of the ego, there's differentiation, there's attachment, there's desire, all these things that then, as is said in the Bible, then we will be dark inside. So that's a sentient being. Okay, that's not a Buddha, right? And then the verse that comes before that says, "No one lights a lamp and puts it in a place where it will be hidden or under a bowl." Right? Instead, he puts it on a stand so that those who come in may see the light. So we have this Buddha nature, this light. Okay, we're supposed to show it, right? We're supposed to manifest that, express that light. Okay, not the darkness. Right? So basically, it's like in the 10 Great Vows, we say, "Do not conceal the Tao." Right? We have to manifest that Buddha nature. Do not cover it up with our bad temper, our habits, or our differentiation, our biases, right? Our prejudices, things like that. All those things kind of cover it up. And so what we're showing is that darkness, not the light, right? So we have to learn to basically, manifest that. And so the practice of basically the Noble Eightfold Paths is to help us to achieve that. And basically other the practices that Confucius or Lao Tzu, that we all talk about, is to achieve that. And then so basically ultimately we can achieve when there is no self, that anatta, we have the four immeasurable minds of a Buddha. All right, the loving kindness to all beings, compassion to those in suffering, joy and liberation of others from suffering, and equanimity or non-discrimination to all beings. So that we are basically one with all we are one with all beings. Okay, so that there is no distinction. Right, and so as a more maybe practical matter, I mean, when we're dealing with things, you could say we should be like water, right? The qualities of water, it can be very gentle, and we have to be humble, do the things that maybe people don't want to do, be tolerant, accommodating, and forgiving, right? Also being very flexible and appropriate. Again, and this is where, so the Wu Wei, the Sui Ren, the egoless intent or action, basically kind of sums it up. And then also be like a mirror where we have no bias. So when we're dealing with people and matters, situations, that you could say this is like, being completely objective. Okay, so there's basically all we can say is like being unbiased in how we view things, how we see things, right? So part of actually the proper view is, seeing things as they really are and not going through any kind of bias in terms of our conceptions of how things are. And then also no attachment, right? So when the matter arises, we deal with it and without bias, and when it's done, we let it go. We're not attached to that, right? Okay, all right. So finally, so the middle way is the path to liberation and nirvana. That's Buddha's basically you can say his prescription or kind of recipe to try to transcend from the cycle of suffering. Okay, the way to eliminate the four images and the false self. So the idea is to become selfless. If you look at the Buddhas and saints, they are selfless. Okay, and so they've achieved that. And it's very, maybe it's difficult for us to do, but that's something that we have to strive towards. Okay, be less selfish. Okay, and be more selfless and more. That's why all the practices, even like the 6 paramitas, things like that, to help us to achieve this goal. The way of non-duality, again, don't fall into the right and wrong, like and dislike. Because those, again, are bias. They're biases, really, and so we and that will lead us to stay in this path, the cycle of reincarnation. All right, so Noble Eightfold Path, again, the three aspects that it covers, the practice is our wisdom, the ethical conduct, and concentration of the mind. Okay, and then what I call the centeredness and harmony, right? Using the wu-wei and the sui-yin, the egoless intent and action, and basically being having an appropriate response to things. Again, this is not. There's no absolute answer, right? There's no absolute response that this is, this is the only right response. So whatever is appropriate, and this again depends on our, using our wisdom and not having. If we can actually get rid of all our biases, all those other things, differentiation, then the response that comes out will be appropriate. Okay, it should be appropriate. All right. Okay. So, oh, sorry. Yeah, I did this. Okay, so finally, I hope that, having introduced this Noble Eightfold Path, this middle way, that hopefully we can all strive towards achieving that goal of the non-self, or and basically, and do it in this lifetime. Actually, it's possible. It just requires a lot of effort, but we can do it. And so I hope that may the Tao be with you, so that we can also we can all succeed in this effort. Okay, so if I had said anything wrong or not satisfactory, I certainly ask the Buddhists for forgiveness, and also ask transmitting masters and lecturers for their corrections. Okay, thank you.